I mean, we just shot in such incredible locations. Like we shot at Olivia Newton-John's house. I found that up in Malibu. We shot at this castle in Beverly Hills. And then we had all these animals. So we had a horse, we had wolves, we had owls, so for me, that was a lot of fun.
Hello, my name's Jim Ellis, and you're watching Industry Insights, where we bring in industry professionals to share their insight and expertise to the next generation of filmmakers and content creators. We're here at this beautiful film hub in the wonderful film-friendly city of Vista, California. The co-working space with Soundstage Studios. And our guest today is Karin Fittante. And Karin is the owner of KF Productions. She's collaborated with top-tier agencies and worldwide brands, too many to mention. She's worked in New York and all across North America, the Caribbean, Europe, but she lives here in a quiet neighborhood in Vista, California. And recently we just met at the Yellow Deli and found out we're practically neighbors, so it's wonderful to have you here, Karin.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah. It's great to be here.
Thanks so much. New York native, that's kind of dear to my heart because I grew up in Connecticut, just on the outskirts. And tell me something about growing up in New York City that inspired you to get into the advertising agents industry.
Well, I mean, you know, when I look back now, I loved New York. It was an incredible experience. At the time, that was all I knew. So I didn't even realize that the rest of the United States was so different. And especially because New York kind of fosters this, we are the center of the world vibe. So
they do. And I wasn't even in New York, and I got that in living in Connecticut, right? Like everything in between New York and LA was cultural wasteland, you know. But, you know,
yeah.
Sorry, rest of the world. But
I know. And, you know, once you start traveling, you realize that that's really not the case.
True.
But I don't, when I was a kid, I mean, I grew up in Tudor City and they had filmed they were always filming there. I mean, it was right across the street from the United Nations, and they filmed everything from like Splash to Scarface. And, you know, I'd be walking around with my dad and just looking at everything, and it just always fascinated me. So then I wound up actually going to Boston University for film. And that's how the whole thing started. Yeah.
Was your dad in the industry?
Nope. But he just, I don't know. He knew everybody in the neighborhood. There were a couple of actors that lived there, like Art Garfunkel lived there at one point. And so everybody was always really friendly. And whenever there was a film going on, my dad would bring me down to check it out.
Was he in government there? What did he do?
No, it's funny because, Tudor City natives always used to complain because the diplomats had parking immunity, so they could park out anywhere. So people actually used to kind of get annoyed by the DPL plates. But no, my dad was actually an engineer.
Oh.
Yeah. He was with General Electric for a long time.
So watching all these things happening in New York, you decided to get into film school, and so you went to Boston University.
Yeah, I really wanted to go to New York University, and my parents at that point said I needed to leave New York because I'd gotten a little bit too much into the clubs. I was going out a lot. Yeah, so I figured Boston was the next closest place.
The next closest party place. Oh, so.
Well, closest to New York so I could get back as much as I wanted. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you get to go to school and you find out a little bit about the industry. What was your first job?
Initially, it was a couple of internships through Boston University. And then after I graduated, I actually moved out to San Francisco. Everybody was kind of moving west. And I wasn't ready to go to LA yet. So I went to SF, and my second day there, I was staying with friends, and I was walking down the street, and a friend of mine who I knew from Boston, I ran into her just walking down Haight, and she was like, "Hey, we need a PA. I'm doing a big shoot for Macy's. Do you want to do it?" And I was like, "Yeah." So they sent us to Napa Valley. And we just shot for a week, and I I just fell in love with it. It was awesome. So I didn't really PA that much, because I took a very circuitous route. I was in SF, the Macy's job was great, I had one more, and then things kind of slowed down a lot, and after a few months, I decided to move back to New York after temping for a while, although I did temp for Wynton Marsalis at Lincoln Center, so that was kind of crazy. But,
What was that company?
well, Lincoln Center was just so awesome, going there every day for work, but I wasn't challenged at all. I mean, I was basically like, an administrative assistant. So
Mm.
I temped for a couple of months. And then I was getting ready to go up to my uncle's restaurant in Martha's Vineyard for the summer because I just couldn't get work. And I was like, I'll just, Uncle Paul was like, we'll get something for you. But I'd been applying to jobs and I got a call from this publishing company saying that they were looking for a photo researcher.
Mm.
And I went in and I got the job. And that was down in Soho. And that really started the path for visual, because by that point I'd worked on a couple of friends' music videos, and I wound up liking the photography side of it better because there's a lot more creativity, because since I was just starting out, and I was at FOCA, I believe, for 2 years, and that was when I started producing shoots and we did all the photo research, and then I became the photo editor. And they all kind of encompass very similar aspects. Production, you get a lot more into the financial sides of it. And I feel like photo editing and photo researching is a little bit more creative. And after FOCA, I actually got a job as a photo researcher at the Museum of Natural History.
Mm.
And that was awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, they gave me the keys to the place. Like I could bring people, back behind the exhibits where they stored all these, bones that they'd excavated, because I was with the vertebrate paleontology department. And their two biggest gigs were in Mongolia and Montana.
Huh.
They've uncovered the two largest caches of T-Rexes
No
in
kidding.
those places.
Huh.
Yeah. So that was more visually driven and visual research and, dealing with the entire vertebrate paleontology. And after that, my old boss at FOCA called me up, and she had gotten a job for Sussex Publishers. And they owned the magazines, Spy Magazine, Mother Earth News, and Psychology Today. And they were looking for another photo editor. So she brought me in.
Oh.
So, when I look back at like the whole trajectory, you really start to realize how small these industries are,
Mm-hmm.
and how you cross paths with so many different people. And I think that's why it's really important to kind of just always have a very positive outlook and be nice, because you
Mm-hmm.
never know and not because like it's going to get you something, but because like I've made such great relationships through the years, with like photo editors or senior, editors or directors or cinematographers. And it's just really nice, like you'll be somewhere and you'll run into someone you haven't seen for like 15 years.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I remember that job.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing that I love about this is every shoot is different. I mean, I have crews in certain states where I shoot a lot, but, depending on the ad agency or the creative director that's on the job, there's such different personalities.
Mm-hmm.
So, and usually when you're going, especially like I'm not really in I haven't done magazines for a long time, but once I got into the film side of it, sometimes it feels like you're going through a war. I mean, it is crazy, and everyone's like ready to kill each other by the end, and you're all exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you're done and you've got your finished product, it's just like such a great feeling. I don't even know how it's like magic. Like
Yeah.
you've like accomplished something.
And you couldn't do it on your own. You needed all these crazy people
Oh yeah.
to pull it off, to make this
It's
masterpiece.
such a team effort.
Yeah, that's I think what I enjoy about it as well. just the talent, the quality of the talent. What natural ability do you feel like you have that lends itself to production?
I would say, like, the
Besides
number
being nice.
and believe me, there's times where you need to not be nice too. There's times where you have to draw the line on
Mhm.
things. You have to be able to, you know, look at the situation
Sure.
and figure out what would work best.
Right.
Like, we were doing a ton of commercials for Publix supermarkets in Florida, and at the end of one of the shoots, my director and the crew presented me with a gift, and I was like, "Oh god, what is this?" Because we had just been shooting cakes, so I'm like, "They're going to throw a cake in my face. I know it," because these guys were always pulling pranks. And I opened it up, and it's a whip. And they because 'cause I'm always like, "Don't make me crack the whip." So
Oh,
I have
that's
this
awesome.
huge whip hanging on my wall. But, I would say curiosity. I mean, I'm always really curious about figuring out how to make the job work because you always have so many variables in terms of budget, in terms of creativity, in terms of the talent. And so it's like a puzzle, and I think that's the challenge that I really love.
Yeah.
Like, I'm always trying to figure out, "Okay, do I need to call this person? Like, who's going to be best for this particular job?" Because I've done everything from, lifestyle to high-end hotels to food, and they all require really different elements
Mhm.
and really different teams. So putting that all together is always really fun for me.
Yeah, that's great. Not let alone that, but also scheduling and so many pieces to putting
Yeah.
things together. Well, that's great. Um, what was the transition from working for other people to KF Productions?
I think it was really kind of just an organic process because as I kept taking on jobs, like initially I was just getting hired as a producer. And then when I created KF Productions, it was to basically incorporate everything into what I was doing. And it just made more sense on a financial level
Mhm.
because once you have the production company, I don't know if I want to use this word, but you kind of control things more
Mhm.
rather than just being a producer for hire.
Yeah.
And I liked that element a lot better too.
How do you approach conceptualization of a project, especially when you're working with such diverse clients?
Well, usually, I get the call, and the first stage is they'll ask me to submit a bid for the job. And when I've been on the ad agency side of it, a lot of times it's triple bid. And then, they'll determine based upon the budget that's presented and the director or photographer attached with the project, they'll determine who they're going to use for the job. And then after that, we'll usually get on a creative call. And that also really depends on the job because I have directors who want me heavily involved in it, where I'm like creating the shot list because I had done photo directing for a long time when I was at magazines, to other directors or photographers where they literally just want me to produce it and handle the budget and the organization and hiring everyone and dealing with the props and food stylists or
Mhm.
wardrobe stylists depending on the job. So but the conceptualization really comes out during the creative call because by that point we've received either the creative brief that the director's drawn up. Sometimes I help him with that. Sometimes they do it independently. A lot of times, if they're represented by an agency, sometimes the agency will help them draw up the creative brief. Um, and that's usually encompassed in the bid as well. So they've already got that. And then when we all jump on the creative call with the ad agency or the client, some clients just go direct, then we hear what they want from the project and how we're going to incorporate the director's vision and style into the elements that they need to be photographed or filmed.
Mhm.
So, and then we start working on the shot list. We get lists from the client as well. There's been food shots I've done where you receive like 100 items and they're like, we need this, photographed 3 different angles against different backgrounds, from the top down. So there's a lot of elements that have to be taken into consideration. And I think the main thing is you just really have to listen to what the client is saying and then almost act as a liaison between the client and the director photographer because that's where people can really clash.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to kind of smooth that all out so that everybody's on the same page.
Right. What's going to work, what's not going to work.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What do you look for when you're hiring talent, such as actors or photographers or directors? Is there some qualities you see in people's lives?
Well, in the beginning, since I had started magazines, we only went through talent agencies. And in the beginning, it was model agencies because we were doing a lot more fashion, especially when I was at New York Magazine. So then, and even at Men's Health, I mean, then there's pretty strict requirements. Like usually they have to be over 6 feet tall, and I know the things are changing, but back then they needed to have a certain look for Men's Health in terms of their physique. We had a separate casting director, but sometimes I would jump in if we needed something really specific. Um, and then even when I've done a lot of commercials and stuff, you need to go with talent through recognizable agencies so that they know how to move in front of the camera. When it's photography, it can be a little bit easier because it's not three-dimensional. But if you have someone doing a commercial, they need to know how to utilize the space, how to, look correctly. There's something in the industry that we call one face, where if you don't have a very experienced talent, sometimes they'll just like freeze, or they'll just have like one face for every single shot. And, you usually want a lot more diversity, but they'll just be like, and you're like, no, come on, give me something else. And they need to emote. It is really interesting, but some people, they either have that hidden quality, that charisma, that where the camera really loves them. And you really see it, when you're looking through the film. So, but then when I got out here, I started to do a lot more lifestyle. And then you're not really always going through big modeling agencies. There's talent agencies as well. And that is really more, you're not going for necessarily like a super model-y look so much as you're going for someone who's more relatable
Right.
or more affable. And they also have to be very comfortable in front of the camera and know how to move and everything. So we've also done stuff where you just do open calls. So, say we're doing like a skateboard company. So sometimes we'll just try to reach out to people in the skateboard industry because then you want it to be really real. So it really depends on the project.
Right. Okay. All the myriad of productions you've done, which one stands out to you and why?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. God, there's a lot that stand out, obviously for different reasons. When I think back, like one that really pops into my mind is at one point when I first got out here, I was getting hired to produce for Charlotte Russe, and they had awesome budgets, and I was able to get this fashion photographer, Bumper, who was really big back in the day. And we just shot in such incredible locations. Like we shot at Olivia Newton-John's house. I found that up in Malibu. We shot at this castle in Beverly Hills. And then we had all these animals. So we had a horse, we had wolves, we had owls, so for me, that was a lot of fun.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, speaking about locations, that's got to be a challenge in itself. You could use location scouts. Is that how you find some of these places?
Yeah, for the most part, if I can use a location scout, I will. And, they'll usually have huge databases that they send to me that then I'll go through and then I'll, narrow it down and send it to the director and the client to review. But again, it depends on the budget. With smaller budgets, I'll just location scout, and then you send photos and there's such like a huge spectrum of what can be involved in any shoot. And it's really unfortunately, the bottom line is it's contingent on how much money you have.
Right.
And then you figure out, okay, do we need the location to be the star of this shoot? Do we need the talent to be the star? And then you really figure out where you're going to allocate your funding.
Can you think of a particularly challenging production that how you navigated through the challenges to success?
Yeah, I had
Besides working with crazy wolves,
a
that had to be a little interesting.
the wolves were interesting because first of all, they didn't look like wolves to me, like, they looked a lot skinnier. It was weird.
The
They almost
coyotes are
look
cheaper
like
to rent, I think.
I would think coyotes would be friendlier too. The funny thing was we were shooting up at, Griffith Park, and there were all these coyotes running around because they'd gotten so accustomed to being fed by people,
Oh,
and I thought they looked better aesthetically than the wolves we had. But they were like, "Don't move. Don't go quickly. Don't look them in the eye." Like, they gave us this list. The poor model was petrified,
Yeah.
but we finally got her to, kind of relax.
Get a
But
different look from her, except
I know. Yeah, that was her one look. Yeah. But, I would say, I've had a couple of shoots where the director or the photographer disagrees with the client and things start to escalate. And, I've had to kind of step in and really try to mediate so that we can get back on that same page. I also had one shoot, God, this was in New York, where the photographer and the CGI, it was a big CGI shoot, and the CGI guy, they almost got into a fist fight, and that was crazy. And, again, I had to step in and be like, "Come on, we need to just bring this down a notch."
yeah, and I think that's a great quality to have is that of a mediator, because you do have to mediate so many times between people,
Yeah.
and if you can't do that, yeah, things will blow up pretty fast.
Yeah, and, at the end of the day, you want to create a beautiful product, but the way I look at it is like, we're not saving lives here, so let's put it into perspective and get the egos in check
Right.
and, just try to have a little fun while we're doing it. I mean, it's a great job, I've been fortunate enough to travel all over the world, I'm, like, in these beautiful locations, so you're working your butt off, and it's like 12 and 14-hour days, but you wanna try to enjoy yourself too.
Sure.
Just
Yeah.
appreciate what you're being involved in.
Yeah, exactly. And so what kind of challenges come with working internationally that you've noticed, or
Work
unique considerations that you have to
Yeah.
think about?
Well, nowadays, I think it's so much easier because, like, I'm just tapped into a lot of producer organizations, so I can call other people, or just there's a lot of you go to Europe, it's the same thing as in the States. There's agencies that you can go through, who deal with, like, crew or hair and makeup or wardrobe stylists. So you start reaching out to who you know, and you start to put things together. Um, the other thing, though, is I've done video productions in Europe and photography, but I haven't done, like, a huge broadcast commercial, so I think that would be on a different level as well. So we've usually had small crews, like under 20 people, so it's been pretty easy to manage.
Okay. What wisdom can you share with those who want to get into this industry?
I honestly think one of the best ways to get your foot in the door is to do an internship or to start out as a production assistant. And I was producing an episode of The Amazing Race, the French version, up in LA. And I hadn't been out here that long, and it was the first time where I realized, not the first time, but I mean, it was a perfect example of how important a good PA is. And, if you are a good production assistant, you will rise quickly. Like, you will get to know people, you will make yourself be known. And the difference between a good production assistant and a bad production assistant is so obvious within the first couple of days of shooting. And so we're doing this crazy thing for The Amazing Race France, and I needed 22 PAs because, you're shooting in all these different things. And I hadn't been in LA that long, so I was calling everyone I know, I was trying to get people, but I had to take a couple of people on recommendation, which isn't something I always like to do. Like, I like to get crews in place that, I've worked with and I know and, or come highly recommended. And these were recommendations from people I didn't really know that well yet.
Mm.
And within the first couple of days, we sent one PA out to get ice, and she never came back. We had another PA who we had like 6 cargo vans for transferring everything. He crashed it and never told us until I got a call. You know, I mean, your insurance takes care of it, but just like little things like that where you realize how important it is to have a good PA. Then another PA, you know, our headquarters were downtown at this hotel. At the start of every meeting, I'd be like, don't forget, they will tow. We cannot park on these streets. We have designated parking here. Last day of the shoot, one of the PAs parks another van right there, got towed. I
Mm,
spent 3 days dealing with getting that, you
mhm.
know? So, and I've had other PAs. I was like up in Oregon on a shoot for Columbia Sportswear, and they all kind of wear different hats because there's not a lot of shooting up there, I guess. But, he was incredible. I mean, he was a PA who anticipated what was needed
Mm,
before I had to say a
there you
word,
go.
and that's what I consider a great PA,
Mm,
and the ones that I've found like that, they don't stay PAs for long, you
mhm.
know, but they're awesome.
Yeah, that's it.
So,
Anticipation is what's needed. That's thinking ahead. That's such a great aspect of production, period.
and just also, I find people who are willing to kinda do whatever's needed, where they're
Mhm.
not like, "Oh, this is my lane," you know, I mean,
Right.
I find that and that doesn't go for PAs, that goes for everybody. That's the people that I'll hire again.
Mhm. So, what do you do to keep your um, creative spark alive? I mean, on the side when you're not working, what do you like to do to relax or just keep yourself energized?
Yeah, no well, you know, I mean, the usual, like, I'm really into I like to do yoga, I feel that that really keeps me grounded and calm, which is really good, because I do think that was a big lesson when I first came out here. I had to bring things down a couple of notches
A
because
little
my
slower
husband, you
pace?
know, here I am from New York, and my husband's like, "You can't call people out." Like, it's such a New York thing. It's like, "Ah, you didn't
Uh,
do that." And he's just like, "People will get freaked out here." He's like, "You just can't do that." And now it's funny because when I go back to New York, everyone's like, "God, you're so much more patient." So
uh,
you know, it's really been like positive things that
is
I've
that a
had
bad
to
thing to be
adjust.
patient in New York?
Well, New York, you know, everything I realized that, like, there's such a crazy high standard, and I think I didn't realize that that's not and I'm not saying that standards are low here, but I think the approach is a lot more laid back.
Mhm.
It's like, "Your hair's not on fire, you don't have to freak out, you don't need it yesterday," you know, I mean, sometimes you do, but I think it's just a more relaxed perspective, and I think learning that and also learning that nothing is ever going to be perfect on a shoot really helped me a lot because in the beginning, I was, you know, so controlling of everything, and finally I was like, "Oh my god, you know what? You just have to be able to learn how to roll with it, or
Mhm.
you're going to have, like, a breakdown,
Right.
because it's just never ever going to be exactly what you think it's going to be." And now I think that's kind of fun because 'cause you're like, "Alright, how am I gonna figure this out? How am I gonna think out of the box?" So it's good, but, sorry, to go
So
back
you
to
like
your
to yoga,
question.
yeah, yoga
Yeah,
is good.
yoga, I've got an electric bike, I love
Ah,
riding my bike everywhere, it's really fun, but, I got really into ceramics, so when I have time, I
really?
do pottery. Yeah, I
Oh,
really love that.
do you have a kiln?
I don't have a kiln, but I have a wheel, so I have
Okay.
a studio that I can fire it in. And, I don't know if you think this is work, but, like, as a side project, which I really love, one of my directors and I have been working on a documentary in Mexico City for the last couple of years.
Can you say anything about what it's about?
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's about, 3 female boxers,
Mm,
like fighters. One is she's got the Mexico world champion belt, the other one has the middleweight belt, and the third is young and starting out, but she wants to qualify for the Olympics. So that has been incredible and super creative. It's a director that I met, like, probably 15 years ago when I was working for Bon Appetit magazine and traveling all over for them. I mean, I know that's still part of the industry, but to me, that's not work because
yeah,
it's
your own
like it's
project.
just our own
Mhm.
project, and it's been super creative, and just these women are incredible. I mean, it's just Mexico City's awesome, like, I love going down there, but,
Mm,
you know, these women basically it's called Chingona, which means basically like badass in Spanish.
Hmm.
And they're in this society which is very, machismo driven still.
Yeah.
And, not all of them have had the support of their family or, even their brothers, because they're like, women shouldn't be fighting. And for all three of them, it's really been a way out of poverty.
Wow.
So just watching them on this journey, and I mean, they just,
Hmm.
they're just very inspiring. Yeah, and just, I mean, they'll give you the shirt off their back. They're just so there's something very giving and very open about all the people that we've met down there that I don't encounter as much in our slightly more capitalistically driven society.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you're talking about these kids who grew up in the country more than a big city, right?
yeah, I mean, it's Mexico City, but
Mhm.
like two of them live right near Iztapalapa, which is considered like the slums of
Mhm.
Mexico. Like when we go shoot them, we actually have to have a security guard and they always have us leave before like 5 o'clock because
Because
it
of
can
the
get really
areas.
dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So have you had to learn a number of different languages to work in all these places, or you just have people translating for you?
Well, I speak a tiny bit of Italian. I took a couple years of Italian in college. So, and I studied in Florence. So I speak enough to get by and I can read it. And then Spanish, I studied in high school and I had friends who were from Spain. And going back to Mexico, it's really come back, which has been awesome. So I can have like full conversations now with the crew and everything. I'm not at that I would not say I'm fluent because if they start speaking really fast, I'm like, despacio, por favor,
Mhm.
but as far as reading and directions and everything, I'm fine.
So what's next for you or your company? And do you have anything on the horizon or goals?
Well, I think the documentary is definitely one of them. I mean, my director and I have started a LLC, Apolog Films. So we're hoping to kind of go more in the direction of documentaries
Hmm.
down the road because I don't know. I feel like we kind of started it because we wanted to give back. Like we've both had these great careers. And, with social media, the industry has definitely changed a lot. And in some regards, I don't find it necessarily as creative as I used to. So I think pivoting towards documentaries is going to be a little bit more fulfilling for me. Additionally, since we just moved out to Vista, my husband's asking that, I traveled so much for work, and he's like, "Why don't you whenever it gets to like this apex, he's like, "Why don't you slow down a little, maybe try to get stuff locally." So that's usually when I'll try to get work more locally, which I've enjoyed. So I'm kind of, going more in that direction. I just got back from New York, so I'm still in post-production on the shoot I did. And
What was that
we'll
last one?
see. That was actually for Humira Pharmaceutical.
Mm.
So they're always a little crazy. Pharmaceutical jobs are always like another level because since it is involving medicine, there's usually lawyers on set to make sure, like, say we're doing an ADHD drug, we couldn't have anything flashing. We couldn't have computer monitors up. We couldn't, and then you have to really tie it into the colors with wardrobe. So there's a lot more other aspects involved, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot involved. Yeah, when you watch a commercial for
Yeah.
drugs, that's for sure. Wow. Okay, well, good. To learn more about you and what you're doing, where do people go online?
www.fittante.com. That's FITTANTE.com. And that really illustrates a pretty wide range of what I've produced. Um, and I'm on Instagram as at Karin Fittante. So,
Oh, good. Well, thanks for coming. It's been great. I'm
yeah,
glad we ran into each other and
I
you're
know.
in the
It's so
neighborhood. And
serendipitous or something. It's so
yeah,
crazy. Yeah.
there's so many talented people coming out of the woodwork here in Vista. It's always been an artist enclave, but I guess it's still attracting artists, and it's just a nice vibe here.
Oh, yeah.
And so look forward to seeing who else is out here. And There was one time, it wasn't long ago, maybe 10 years ago, when we wanted to do our feature film, and somebody told us, "You can't do a feature film in North County." He said, "There's no talent, there's no facilities, there's no equipment." There's all these reasons why, right? But since then, man, it's changed like 180 degrees.
I think it's awesome that you have this film hub here that brings the community together. You
Mhm.
know, I'm really stoked that I ran into you and met you, and it's
Yeah,
been
that's
pretty
really
cool.
helped. Yeah, and I remember bringing people here not too long ago that were kicking and screaming on, "Why am I going to Vista? You know, what's in Vista?" So anyway, it's been
Yeah,
fun.
I'm really enjoying Vista, so it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, good. Glad you're here.
Thank you. Yeah.
For more information on the Film Hub, be sure to follow us on your favorite social media at the Film Hub Inc. and visit our website at thefilmhubinc.com. See you next time.